By the time I had finished high school, I would have spent an estimated 109 full days in public transit. I commute 3 hours a day, which has been a sacrifice I've been willing to endure since grade 8 to come to Vancouver College. It's been worth it. However, spending as much time as I do in public transit has allowed me to spend a great deal of time observing human behavior and social contagion that I otherwise would not have noticed. By social contagion, I'm referring to how human emotion and action can influence the other individuals in your vicinity. So I noticed in the morning as I got on the bus, and the person in front of me would say good morning to the bus driver, I felt more inclined to say good morning as well. As I exited the bus after school, and I would say thank you to the bus driver, I noticed that everyone behind me would also say thank you as well. As a senior citizen came on the bus, and I would give up my seat for that individual, so would 3 or 4 other people around me, even though only one seat is needed for this person. If I chose to be antisocial and keep to myself, those around me would do the exact same thing. But if I chose to smile and interact with those around me would be very receptive to that. So it was noticing these human tendencies and behaviors is what made me want to come here today to talk about the possibilities and opportunities we all possess through social contagion. I want to influence and inspire other people to act and feel how I do, or whatever is ideal. So this means that if it is most beneficial for a colleague of mine to be more hardworking in a certain situation, I want that. Or if my friend is down in the dumps, I want him or her to feel happy and to feel great again. If I'm feeling excited and energetic, I want those around me to feel the exact same way. So I want this, and I'm sure all of you would like this same influence in possibly another scenario, but how is it achievable? How do we influence the actions and emotions of those around us? Well, influencing the emotions and actions of others around us is possible through our own life in action. Human behavior is spread by simple exposure and human interaction. First, it is important to understand that your behavior is paramount in influencing the behavior of others. This is because human behavior clusters and spreads from person to person, usually without our knowing. Your behavior alone can conjure hysteria, being exaggerated thought, emotion, or action, deliberate self-harm, rule violation, and unorthodox financial behavior in someone you are close to or someone you may not even know, purely because of how you acted in a certain situation. A remarkable instance of hysterical behavior being spread was seen within a textile factory in the United States, referred to as the June bug. So what happened here was 62 workers reported being bitten by a mythical bug that caused numbness and nausea, and what was found was it was the very verbal reporting of these symptoms is what spread them across the laborers in a disease-like manner, rather than the symptoms themselves. There was no manifest basis for these symptoms to be established, nor was there an identifiable pathogen that could have caused such discomforts. So ultimately, it was one worker's sheer belief that brought the other 61 workers to the same conclusion of a mythical bug. Now, sitting here, you may be thinking that these workers were gullible, ridiculous, and maybe even uneducated. But because human behavior is contagious, there's actually a good chance that you may have come to think that a mythical bug had been attacking you and your coworkers as well. A more dangerous behavior that can be spread is the behavior of deliberate self-harm. An example of this occurred on an enormous scale roughly 2 centuries ago as a wave of suicide swept across Europe as if the very act of suicide had turned into a devastating pandemic. Many of the suicide victims had read The Stars of Young Werther by Johann van Gogh, in which the hero in the story, Werther, commits suicide himself. In a desperate ploy to stop these dual suicides, authorities across Europe banned the book from being distributed. So Johann's interaction with his audience through text resulted in a rather negative outcome, because the ideas he was sharing were compelling enough to make members of his audience go as far as killing themselves. Johann did this through his media, but the same instance can be seen in modern day media, where ideas and actions being spread on the internet, on the news, good or bad, are playing a role in the future decisions of viewers. An example of this are the various social media challenges like the Cinnamon Challenge, the Gallon Challenge, and the notorious Tide Pod Challenge. Now, for those of you who are unfamiliar, I want to highlight the Tide Pod Challenge because I think it will be the most shocking and fun to talk about. The Tide Pod Challenge shows kids biting into bright colored liquid laundry detergents produced by Tide. It also shows adults either chewing or cooking these Tide Pods in frying pans before sinking their teeth into the pod, swallowing the toxic cleaning solution. So for the parents in the crowd, you don't actually have to worry about your toddler getting a hold of one of these Tide Pods, but also your teenager or your spouse. So what makes someone want to eat a Tide Pod? I'm sure if you were to take an individual who participated in the challenge prior to the challenge existing and ask them, hey, would you eat a Tide Pod? I'm sure they would say no. But ultimately, it was a meme and multiple videos of other people doing it that led them to do the exact same thing. More obviously, the behavioral contagion of aggression has been seen constantly throughout history and occurs with what seems like almost every week, where riots and mobs filled with average civilians accomplish horrendous things, because those who are partaking in such an event feed off the energy and actions of the person beside them, with the unpredictability of the crowd rising with every step, and the rationale of the individuals plummeting every second they continue. This can make an individual as completely sane, rational, kind, and compassionate do things that in our minds only criminals or extremists would do. An example I'm sure we could all resonate with is the NHL Stanley Cup riots in 2010 in Vancouver, which seemed to have started by the Canucks losing to the Boston Bruins in Game 7 of the series. Various Vancouverites partook in the event, vandalizing the city and behaving in a destructive manner, even though if you were to take a lot of these individuals away from the crowd, they would never even think of doing these things. Like I'm sure the up-and-coming water polo athlete with scholarship opportunities never thought he was even capable of lighting a police cruiser on fire. But in such an environment, the behaviors of those around him influenced him to do so. So these are instances that truly embody social contagion. However, there are instances of behavioral contagion that occur more frequently in your own life that you could further relate to. So let's say you're out for dinner, and the waiter asks you if you would like some dessert. You think, of course I would. I'm not entirely full, and I've always had room for dessert anyway. Here, you have made your own decision. Now, what happens when there's 4 other people at your table who all say no thank you to dessert before you have had a chance to answer? Would you still order dessert? Or would you change your decision? Jonah Berger, a Stanford PhD and professor of marketing at the University of Pennsylvania, asserts that these influences are so strongly embedded in our nature that they are practically impossible to resist. Sitting here now, you may be thinking, nonsense. I don't care what the people at my table think or say. I would get dessert if I want to. But their behavior can influence you to the point where you don't even realize. And you end up saying no thank you to dessert because you think you never wanted it, but in actuality, it was because of the decision of the other 4 people at your table. So why is all this important? Let's say you associate yourself with individuals who live unhealthy lifestyles, where they eat poorly, have a negative mood, and don't produce. The chances of you doing the same with them are much higher. What you can do to reverse this is be a catalyst for the change you wish to see in their behavior, as well as yours. Start living the life you've always dreamed, and the energy you emit by your behavior, actions, and emotions will rub off on those around you, changing your environment for the better. Those around you will mimic your actions, behavior, your routine, and better themselves by falling to this human fabric we live in. This can spread even further to hundreds and thousands of people you don't even know, because your neighbor will mimic you, and their neighbor will mimic them, and so forth, to the point where your behavior, or specifically your energy, attitude, and charisma, has impacted the global community. Thank you.